pardon me, say a little prayer, my voice makes it through the sermon. Have you ever turned on the news and just been completely overwhelmed? Yes, of course, I know. Lots of head shaking. Of course you have. You're conscious, compassionate, loving people. I don't even know why I'm asking that question. I know that you have felt that way. I've talked with you about how you have felt that way. Witnessing the collective hurt caused by systemic violence and oppression leaves all of us wondering from time to time, is there anything I can do? Now, I ask that question as a straight, white, cisgendered, middle-class clergy person. I am a person of privilege. I know that there is something that I can do. But I'll confess, I get so nervous about saying the right thing or doing all the things the right way or not offending a group or causing more pain or thinking, will this even make a real difference? That at times, I paralyze myself from taking any action at all. Today's story from Luke reminds me of the first time I drove a 12-passenger van. This was on a mission trip years ago. I was an adult sponsor, 25 years old, because you had to be 25 to drive those vans. And as I sat in the driver's seat and turned on the engine, I said something like, "Oh, I can feel the power." And then one of the youth, high school youth sitting right behind me, said that infamous line from Spider-Man, "With great power comes great responsibility." You know, that wisdom resonates deeply with our gospel reading today that Crystal so beautifully sang. At first, the people who followed John and later Jesus, they were mostly folks living on the edge of society, the poor, the sick, those who were crushed under Roman rule. John and his followers actually went out to the wilderness specifically to get away from everyone else. But then something interesting happened. The privilege started showing up. Tax collectors, soldiers, people who were definitely better off than their neighbors. They all came seeking baptism. Picture these relatively wealthy, comfortable people standing out there in the wilderness alongside John's community of outcasts and radicals, not in an act of solidarity, but because they wanted to get something. And John, well, wild man that he was, he looks at these powerful people and he calls them out, "You brood of vipers." John doesn't mince words. "Who warned you to run away from what's coming?" he demanded. "Don't just show up here thinking, 'Oh, but we're Abraham's children.' Don't think that that's enough. The axe is already at the root of the trees. Any tree that doesn't produce good fruit is going to get cut down and thrown in the fire." John is angry. He's angry at the system that they are upholding. And you can imagine that the crowds that have gathered, both his original disciples, if you will, and these newcomers, that they're starting to get a little nervous, right? I mean, what is John going to do next? And they ask him, well, what should we do then? It's the same question that we ask today when we're confronted with overwhelming problems. What should we do then? And like those ancient seekers, we're often looking for grand, sweeping answers and solutions. But John's answers are practical, and they're specific to each person's situation. To the crowds, he says, share what you have. To the tax collectors, take no more than what is yours. To the soldiers, do no harm in pursuit of personal gain. Each instruction is different, but they all point to the same truth. Do the good that is yours to do. Did you catch that? John doesn't tell the tax collectors to quit their jobs or the soldiers to desert the army. Instead, he tells them to do good within their own circumstances. Be ethical. Don't exploit others. Share what you have. He gives practical, specific instructions, not a laundry list of impossible demands. He directs their attention back home to the way that they treat others in their everyday lives. He extends an invitation for them to be different, to do the good that is theirs to do, to be part of a movement, excuse me, to be part of a movement that is changing the system and the current power structures. One moment. I wanted us to stop and think about that line. Maybe you're sitting here thinking, well, I don't have any power. What can I do? And this is where the prophet Isaiah speaks directly to us. The beautiful promise of Isaiah 58 wasn't written for the powerful or the privileged. It was written for ordinary people, even those that society labeled as poor or powerless. God didn't see them in that way. Listen to what God promises through the prophet Isaiah. You shall be called the repairers of the breach, the restorers of the streets to live in. Think about that for a moment. You shall be called the repairers of the breach, the restorer of the streets to live in. God doesn't call them to fix every broken thing in the world. Instead, we're called to repair the breach right where we are, to restore the streets that we live in. This isn't about grand gestures or worldwide transformation. It's about fixing what's broken in our neighborhood and in our community. We saw this type of street restoration action just this past Friday night when several of our neighbors gathered on the corner of Tilton and Ellsworth to light up the night and raise awareness for dog and pedestrian safety. About a year ago, on the evening of Las Posadas, one of our neighbors and her dog were hit at that intersection by a car. And tragically, her dog was killed. This fall, she attended our pet blessing, and we blessed his ashes and her new four-legged companion that she brought with her. But as you can imagine, that accident weighed heavily on her, especially because she knew that they were not the only two who had been hit by a vehicle at that intersection. So she asked herself, what can I do? She reached out with an idea about distributing information about nighttime safety and asked if she could gather on our campus to distribute lights and information. She posted on Facebook and Nextdoor and reached out to the city and downtown San Mateo, unsure if anyone would show up. But she was trying to do her little bit of good. And she did. Over 25 people stopped by to show support and help distribute flyers. This is what Advent preparation looks like in practice. As we prepare for Christ's coming, we're called not just to thoughtful reflection, but to active participation in God's work of transformation. Just as John gave specific guidance to each group that came to him, there are specific ways that each and every single one of us can do good right here in our community. Do you have some free time in the afternoons or evenings from 4 to 5:45? Maybe you're going to be off work a little bit. Maybe you're off school and back from college. Sign up and help serve food at the Samaritan House dining service in Kloss Hall. Find Jim Granucci. He'll get you signed up right away. Or you can join us for the MLK Day of Service, where we will gather with people from all over our community on January the 20th to make it a day on and not a day off, to do our change together, our bit of good to change our community. If you want information about that, the link for signups will be in Connections this week, but there's also a sign-up sheet on the welcome table in the narthex. Write your name down, and we will make sure that you get the registration link. Or maybe you can become a partner, a conversation partner with our English Together program when it starts back up in January. You don't need to be fluent in Spanish or English, but this is about coming together and working on our skills. Or you can join our Immigrant Welcome intergenerational, 5th grade and up, service learning trip that we'll be taking to Tucson in June this summer. Let me know if you're interested. I would love for you to join us. You can participate in Las Posadas this Wednesday evening. Better yet, invite your friends, invite your neighbors, or I'm sure Rev Alvaro and his crew could probably use a couple of volunteers to help greet our neighbors who show up that night. You hear him pleading, please. You can also deliver a poinsettia after worship today. There are still poinsettias on the loggia. Take one to someone and remind them that they are not alone. Remind them that they are a blessing. You can select an ornament from our wish tree and get a gift for a kid this Christmas. I talked with Melody before worship, and we have plenty of ornaments that need to be taken so that someone's Christmas wish will come true. Or you can reach out to someone you know. We all have phones or computers, and you can reach out to someone who might be having a difficult time this holiday season and remind them that they are not alone. If you've ever been in my office, you've probably heard before you've seen the metal sign that hangs on my wall. And it reads, "Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly." It rattles. It's a bit jarring, in fact, every time the back door that goes to the parking lot opens or closes. It happens a lot during the day and at night. And I had planned to put something up behind that metal sign to soften this rattling noise. But I hesitate because every time I hear that sign shake, it reminds me of those words from the prophet Micah. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God. It reminds me to not let myself be overwhelmed by the enormity of the world's problems and pain, but to do the good that is mine to do. We all must discern what is mine to do. We can't do it all, but we can do something. And part of that something that we can do is celebrate others in their good work. When we lift each other up and trust that the Spirit is empowering someone else to do their work, our little bits of good come together to create the beautiful quilts of God's kingdom here and now. As we've said before, Advent is a season of active preparation. We are preparing ourselves to fully welcome God's transformative love into this world and into our lives. And while the story of preparation isn't new, it is made new each year, each season, each day. Every Christmas brings a fresh opportunity to join God in co-creating, to weave together our small acts of goodness into the larger tapestry of God's love at work in the world. Just as John called each person to their special task, we're each called to do the good that is ours to do. And when we each bring our thread, when we each bring our cord, whether it's serving a meal or showing up in solidarity or simply checking on a neighbor, we become part of something larger than ourselves, something that is stronger than our own individual acts. Each small act of justice and kindness, each humble step forward adds to this beautiful tapestry that is covering our world in peace and in love and in compassionate care. And that is the work of justice. That is the work that we are called to do. This Advent is a new beginning. So as we begin again, May we have the courage to stand up in face of our own fears, to do the good that is ours to do, trusting in these small acts of faithful preparation, trusting that God will use them to make way for Christ's transformative love in our world to break in once again and cover us all. May it be so. Amen.